Great. I see that we are already on Facebook Live, so I will click on Start the webinar.
Go ahead, Aziza, c'est bon.
Ok, très bien. Je vais cliquer sur Start the webinar. Parfait. Merci, Sol. Parfait. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Investi Talk number 6. So Investi is the Tunisian community on Euroquity, the matchmaking platform of France. So today I'm very honored and very pleased to be welcoming 4 startup ecosystems representatives from Tunisia, Senegal, South Africa, and also Uganda to talk about empowering African startup ecosystems, and we will have insights from each and every startup ecosystem represented today. So thank you so much for joining us today, and please feel free to leave your comments, your questions, either on Zoom or on Facebook Live throughout the webinar. So I will introduce my guest speakers really quickly, but then I will give them the mic so they can maybe share more information about their background, what they are doing today before we kickstart the webinar. So today we are very pleased to welcome Salma Bardedi, who is the Startup Ecosystem Director at Startup Tunisia, Smart Capital in Tunisia. And then we will have Karine Vavasseur, who is the Head of Innovation and Ecosystem Division at DER Senegal. We also have Caitlin Nash, who is the managing partner at Telling the African Innovation Story Organization in South Africa. And last but not least, we are excited to have Joël Bamwise, who is programs manager at Stambik Business Incubator and also coordinator at KAI Africa. Thank you so much for joining us for this chat to talk about how we can empower the African startup ecosystems. So I will give you a quick word. Maybe we can start with you, Salma. Can you tell us more about yourself before we start?
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much, Aziza, for the invitation and also for giving us this opportunity and building bridges between all our countries here represented. Hopefully it will be a series of many more other webinars so we can learn more about the African ecosystems, and what's happening in Africa right now is really inspiring, and we see like we're witnessing something very special. So I'm very happy to be here today. So my name is Salma. I'm working for Smart Capital, which is the operator of a national initiative, which is Startup Tunisia. My role is more about empowering the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, with a holistic approach through giving opportunity of funds to the startups, but also international connection and promotion for the ecosystem. So this is on a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Salma. Karine?
Yeah, thank you, Aziza. I'm so happy to be sharing this panel with you all and to be able to share about our ecosystems. It's true that we are really at the momentum for Africa at the moment, so it's great to be able to have those level of conversations. So I'm Karine Vavasseur. I'm representing the DER FG. So if I have to sum it up regarding DER, I would say that we are really young and quite a typical state agency that was born 4 years ago. It's a state agency that was set up by the president himself in order to bring support and more direct support to entrepreneurs and be able to really address those who cannot go through the classic system, I mean the financing system. So the idea was to be able to provide the appropriate kind of financial support for those entrepreneurs, but also to provide the kind of support they need in terms of technical assistance. And we cannot do it without considering the ecosystem itself and how we make sure that this ecosystem can be strong enough to support the entrepreneurs. So we have like those 3 levels of intervention, I would say, regarding the ecosystem, the entrepreneurs themselves from a financial aspect, and also a technical assistance aspect. So we've been doing it for 4 years with about 150,000 entrepreneurs so far, and we have this specificity also to be considered a bit like investors and VCs sometimes in startups in particular. So we also have a portfolio of 150 startups we have been supporting so far.
Awesome, thank you so much, Karine. Caitlin?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being able to join the webinar today. My name is Caitlin Nash, and I am the co-founder of a company called Loudhailer, based in South Africa. We work to raise visibility on innovation in the African continent and to build partnerships. We do market entry support for international organizations and startups, as well as expansion support for startups across Africa and into global markets. I come wearing a couple of hats. We are also the implementation organization for Silicon Cape, which is one of the innovation convening organizations at Cape Town. And we are also the implementation partner to the Global Startup Awards Africa, which launched last year and operates in all 55 African countries and seeks really to unify and identify the top 1% of African innovation talent across the continent. From an investment and venture capital space, I also support the South African Startup Act that we are in the process of lobbying here, and participate in the Gig Africa Venture Capital Fund. So thank you for having us.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Joel?
Thank you so much, Aziza, and thank you, team. It's my privilege to be here, and I'd like to, in fact, in the very start, applaud you for pulling this off. The importance of hearing from various ecosystem partners in Africa is long overdue, and I really applaud you for this mobilization. Joe Bamwise is my name, from Uganda, Kampala. I am currently the programs manager at the Stanbic Business Incubator, but for the past 10 or so years, I've been operating in the ecosystem of Kampala, working very closely with various SMEs, startups, micro enterprises, various ESOs, and bigger corporations within the ecosystem. And also at the incubator, we focus a lot more on supporting the skilling of enterprises in Uganda. And our main pillars are from business scaling to access to finance, access to markets, and sustainability. So in our portfolio since 2018, once we opened up to the economy, we have graduated over 2,000 SMEs that have gone through our programs, and we continue to support them at a more deeper level to see them more sustainable and investor ready. So I'm happy to be here, and we hope to discuss further in the due course of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So maybe it's time to kickstart our webinar. I will start with the first question, maybe with you, Salma. So could you tell us more about the national initiatives implemented so far here in Tunisia, and how did they impact and drove the startup ecosystem growth?
Thank you, Aziza. So the initiative is called Startup Tunisia, and it's built on 3 pillars. So 3 main activities that are usually not put together, but in this initiative, they are together. So we're working closely on the legal framework. So through the Startup Act, which has been voted since now the 3rd year. And we're very happy to count so far 646 startups that are benefiting from all the incentives. That can be like a set of incentives, that tax incentives, social incentives, and many others actually that that the entrepreneur himself as a person can benefit of it, or the company or the investors as a third beneficiary. So this is the first pillar. The second pillar is the investment. So we are working also on bringing bringing a very systemic change on the investment landscape in Tunisia through the Fund of Fund initiative. So the Fund of Fund has a target size of 200 million euro. So far we have 40 million, but we're working on fundraisings that will happen soon. And it has the objective to invest in a dozen of new VC, new child funds, and therefore we can really leverage actually the ecosystem through the investment, and give finally at the end of the day more opportunity of funding and of investment and competition to the startups in Tunisia as a country, but also in the region. But because the idea through that is to open the frontiers and to be a country of opportunities for all the startups of the region, not only for Tunisian startups. And the third pillar is actually to work or to fill the gaps that cannot be filled by the legal framework or by the investment framework. So that's why I thought that a holistic approach about fostering the local ecosystem. And therefore, so we work on funding opportunities through grants. So for example, we support startups in their very, very early stage. So we take all the risk of creating new startups through funding their POC development, so the very first version of their innovative solution, because we believe that it is our role first, and second, we need to build up the volume or the pipeline, a very strong pipeline of startups, innovative startups, that will then bring more and more opportunities in the ecosystem. And second, we work also on preparing, on getting ready more startups to a Series A investment. So we have also grant on that field too, and those are actually the two main challenges that are that the Tunisian startups are facing right now. So we try to answer to them and to respond in a very reactive way. But then also we work on connection, we work at giving opportunities to our startups to participate to international events, and also to we work on a more macro way on bringing the lights and the spotlight on the Tunisian ecosystem.
Great. Thank you so much, Salma. A very impressive track record so far since the implementation of the Startup Act framework and the national strategy in Startup Tunisia so far. Maybe later we will discuss the key lessons learned so far. What about South Africa, Caitlin? You are on the process of implementing the Startup Act in South Africa. So could you tell us more about it? How is it going so far? Maybe how it started?
Yes. So I think it started a couple of years ago. You know, to be honest, where it started is an interesting discussion. There are startups that entrepreneurs from over a decade ago, some of who are phenomenal founders in our community who started these discussions. So I think we are very considerate of trying to pinpoint where it started, because it's a groundswell that turns into something that eventually is lobbied into an act. So I think we're very proud to have a vibrant, robust founders mentality where they contribute and feedback into the ecosystem. But more specifically, we have a conference called Africa Arena. I'm sure many people here will be familiar with it. And a couple of years ago at the conference event, the discussion came forward to say it's time to really act on this. At the moment, we have got a draft act that our president has seen, and we've had the opportunity to engage with our president. Really, what we're working on is an act that will provide tax breaks and incentives to encourage investment into qualifying startups. We're looking for VC incentives in terms of access to capital. We're working at the moment at removing some of our skills challenges that we have with our startups. So really, we're looking for employment flexibility and particularly special skills visas and fast-track visas for our startups to travel in terms of pitching their products and meeting with investors and vice versa. Perhaps the biggest challenge that we are working exceptionally hard on here is wanting to address our exchange control limitations. We've seen it's had quite a significant impact on the flow of money into and out of South Africa. And perhaps one of the biggest things we'll achieve with the Startup Act is that our final one out of the act that we're working on is really just working to exempt our qualifying startups from our preferential procurement limitations. So in South Africa, we have very specific procurement regulations, and what we're wanting to say is that startups should not have to conform or meet the same requirements as a very established private company. Perhaps one of our challenges, which we'll get into a bit later, is the story of the definition of a startup. Who qualifies as a startup, who doesn't. We also have very robust, progressive, small enterprise legislation. So it's understanding how the startup asks that we have fit into our Small Business Act here in South Africa. So I think we're very privileged to have a couple of good minds working on it. We're also very privileged that the UK SA Tech Hub and the British High Commissioners from the UK have been able to fund this program. We're always looking for people who are prepared to contribute funding towards our lobbying process. We have evidence, thank goodness to Tunisia, who led the way with their Startup Act. We've seen how it has really had an impact on your macroeconomic indicators. And there's no doubt that we need to follow the same route. I think specifically we were also looking at Italy themselves. They had about a 15% increase in turnover once in startup revenue when they had their act approved. So really it's an exciting time for us. Many people will know South Africa and Cape Town as informally dubbed the tech capital of Africa. I say that carefully with my peers around the room because the competition is hotting up. But we know that the majority of venture capital deals are done in Cape Town, South Africa, and that really we've been fortunate being at the tip of Africa to have a slightly more formalized and matured startup ecosystem. And it's a privilege to be here with the peers today. In terms of what else is happening, our State of the Nation address is coming up, which is when our president addresses the country. We have a very, very strong indication that hopefully we will see movement on our Startup Act, but we won't know until just before. But until then, we continue to work. Our local government down in Cape Town, we have the full support of our government here around a global positioning movement to have Cape Town as the tech capital of Africa, with a springboard into the rest of Africa, our view being to attract investment, talent, and remote working startups into our continent, and to be able to really attract the innovators we need to solve Africa's problems and capture what they're calling the last frontier markets. And I think for the investors who are on the call, perhaps my closing comment here is the big opportunity right now is early stage investing. And that can often seem risky to investors who don't operate on the African continent. But many of the articles you'll see are indicating over a 200% year-on-year increase on the investment deals being done here. And my peers here would surely comment on, while we are working towards big ticket items and Series A's, it's crucial that we have more early stage investment happening.
Exactly. Yes, maybe we will get through this more in depth when we will talk maybe about the challenges faced so far and what we can do in order to tackle them. Thank you so much, Caitlin. I would like to know more about the Senegalese Startup Act. Is it implemented yet? How it started? Also very curious to know more about how the movement started. And is there any exchanges, for example, with Tunisia or with South Africa on the implementation process? How is it going so far in Senegal?
Yes, so we've been co-creating this Startup Act together with the ecosystem. This has been really a really meaningful exercise for all of us stakeholders, because it was the first time that a law was decided all together, and that also led to the fact that the process to validate the law has been a really fast process indeed. So what happens now is that before implementing the law, you need to have the decree validated, and then we can start implementing. So we are in this process of getting the validation so that we can really implement the law as we have co-designed it. So at the moment, we cannot say already what are the impacts of the Startup Act on our ecosystem. What we can say is about the process itself, how we have been able to create that all together. It has been a really hard process to go through. Because we have an ecosystem in which we still also have to convince some of the stakeholders of what is the role of startups here, what they can bring on the table, why is it worthy to bring the taxes lower for them to be able to grow and scale, and why you would be doing some favors to this segment of enterprises when you don't do it for maybe another segment. So you have to make sure that all the stakeholders are already all informed about what a startup is. And it was the first step indeed in our process to be able to really define what a startup is for us in Senegal. So we cannot just take the definition we have in the US, in the Silicon Valley, and just implement it here. It's about how ourselves, can we define this startup, and then what can we bring as incentives for those startups. If you compare the startup act of Senegal with the one of Indonesia, we still have to be bolder. You have some incentives that are really interesting, like paying a salary for a startup to be an entrepreneur to be able to launch a startup. This one is really a great incentive. We want to go to this kind of incentive too, but we are an ecosystem where we are also like leading people to think different than before. So we still have to go phase after phases, so step by step, to be able to have this level of incentive in the future. But already we have been validating the principle of lowering taxes for 3 years for the entrepreneurs, and not just the startups, but new enterprises indeed. There are also some a system of labelization that will be set up, and this labelization also will bring the startups to be more credible on the market, and to get access also to some incentives in terms of getting access to financing, for example. We've been also validating the principle that enterprises that go in consortium with startups will be able to get a diminution of their taxes when getting the procurement done. So all of these are really incentives that will already make the difference. But this is a work in progress, and that's really important to understand that we are not just doing something at one moment and then it's in the rock and it's not moving. So we keep on having conversations with our ecosystem on how we can keep on having this startup act growing and being enriched by all the feedbacks we can have. Maybe if I can also, I just wanted to share just quickly on our ecosystem, because I think it's important also to understand that for me, Senegal ecosystem during the last decade has been really changing a lot. So I was in the ecosystem, I've been in the ecosystem for 8 years now, starting with being in an incubator, then launching a startup, and now joining the government. So I have seen really the diverse dimensions, yes, of the ecosystem. And I can tell you by 8 years ago, we had like 1 or 2 ESOs on the ecosystem. Today we have more than 50. So it shows that there is already something happening in terms of the number of stakeholders that are now trying to get to provide support to the entrepreneurs and specifically to the startups. In terms of startups also, we've been, I would say, almost not in the rankings of startups raising money during the past years. And now for the first time, Senegal is in the top 5 of African countries where startups have been raising funding. So for us, it's really like, it shows that there are some milestones and that we are getting there in terms of having an ecosystem that can really empower the startups and also bring some other startups to come and join us. So our position as the state has been also more and more, has been strengthened during these past years. State was not much present with the startups 10 years ago, but at the moment there has been like a real change in how the government is positioned, and it's really leading at the moment this change for startups. So we've been, for example, creating a fund specifically for these startups. This fund, we do also equity with it and not just debt. So this is really to show that there are some red flags that show that the government is more and more involved in making sure that startups can grow, scale, and that we can also attract the best of them. Also setting up the right infrastructure for them to be able to thrive.
Amazing. Congrats on all the efforts made so far. And I agree on the fact that it is a work on progress. I think maybe also in Tunisia and also in South Africa and also in Uganda, we will see right now with Joël what has been done so far. We keep learning and seeing and adapting the mechanism and the incentives according to the needs of maybe the entrepreneurs. And the role of the government is crucial in order to lead to these incentives and those initiatives in general.
Actually, it's an iterative. It's an iteration, iterative process. the same that we recommend for startups, it's done by us as well. So
exactly. So Joel, could you tell us more maybe about the startup ecosystem in Uganda? I know that we had a small discussion during Emerging Valley in Marseille about the fact that your startup support organizations there in Uganda are you are working on standardizing the mentorship programs, etc. Could you tell us more about these initiatives and how involved are the startup support organizations? And maybe if you have in Uganda some incentives on the legal side for entrepreneurs or for startups in general.
Thank you, Aziza, and thanks everyone. It's a pleasure to hear from common points that are being raised. I liked Kathleen's point of the definition. I remember the last time I was in a conference advocating for the ecosystem. One of the key things that we needed to address was, do we even understand what a startup is, or are we going to import the definition of Silicon Valley? Does that work in the African context? So it's important to also note that this is, for example, a challenge that is across. Which leads me to the question you're asking of what efforts, for example, are going on within the ecosystem of Uganda. Of course, candidly, when you look at the funding map, Uganda rarely appears as of now. All your ecosystems are a little bit more advanced than we are, especially in terms of bringing in the capital and the funding. But on ground, we have been preparing ourselves as an ecosystem on how do we then position the Ugandan ecosystem and how do we advocate better, also leading to a startup act. We of course inspired by all the progress. Tunisia, of course, you are leading the way. Then of course Senegal, South Africa. And also we have seen developments in Ghana and in Rwanda where bills have now been tabled on seeing that this progress comes to life. And for purposes of Uganda, the ecosystem decided to come together through an initiative for ecosystem builders in the country, supported by the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, which is really the arm of government that is overseeing the private sector development, and with a couple of other partners like the UNCDF, we've built together what we call the Startup Uganda. And this is a collaboration that is being financed by UNCDF and PSFU, which is the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, to move the agenda of building the Startup Act. We have, as of now, we are still in consultative meetings that have been happening over the past year. It is really just one year, which of course, one plus a couple of months, which was a little bit disrupted by COVID, of course, but a number of consultative meetings have happened, and getting to the point of both Karine from Senegal and then Nash of when you come to the definition, one of the snags we hit in the due process was a consultation by the Ministry of Trade here, which is the formal ministry that would kind of take care of all matters SMEs and micro, of wondering, can we rather use existing policies to update existing policies that then would take care of the Startup Act? But then that of course raises a question of, do the people that are supposed to make the decisions, do they understand what the entire phenomena of startups is about? So that's, for example, a conversation that is still happening. And of course, when such conversations begin, it shows how the ecosystem must work together for a more common understanding of what we even want to achieve. Because as you know, I'm glad at least Karine is in government. I don't know who else is in government here, but the people sometimes who understand the ecosystem are outside the policy making process, which can also create a small impediment in that regard. But progress is being made there, and we are working full board in terms of giving you a picture of the ecosystem of Uganda. We have a number of course, co-working spaces that are available, and in the past, there were just a couple of hubs that were even beginning to initiate, like let's say 5 years ago, that were beginning to initiate the process of can people work together, and then of course they kept on improving beyond co-working spaces to now offering entrepreneurial support. The only challenge that I have noted in our ecosystem is at what level are we doing the support. So there are a number from universities to various NGOs, non-government organizations, or donor partners that are funding various initiatives. But of course, the outcomes must also be seen. I know we'll get into some aspects of what challenges we see, but the ecosystem now, and when we talk about the ESOs that are supporting the entrepreneurs, there are quite a number. We are almost clocking to 100 in terms of their separate capacities, but we'll divulge deeper later on what are each of them may be offering, and how can what are we learning from the ecosystem.
Great, amazing. Thank you, Joel, for sharing. I think there is a lot of willingness and willpower in order to change things in the 4 ecosystems represented today, which is great. Maybe this will make a good transition, maybe to talk about the key lessons learned so far, since, for example, the implementation of the Startup Act in Tunisia. Salma, is there any key learnings worth sharing today on this panel? And maybe how we talked about the fact that it is a work in progress earlier. So how are you doing so far? Do you create spaces in order to test and learn? How do you iterate?
Yeah, sure. Actually, we're facing some challenges right now because, and I'm sure now Caitlin or Karen or Joel would share this kind of experience with me, because the paper that you present to the parliament or to the president, it's not quite the same than the one you had just worked with the ecosystem. You have then to find a lot of, to do a lot of trade-offs and to go actually to the more and most important things that you want to keep in that law to get it passed, but then you see, okay, that will be in my next challenge or in my next fight. And here we are now. We have a lot of actually ecosystem actors are working on a V2 for the ecosystem, for the Startup Act. So it's still a work in progress. There are a lot of things that we'd like to work on them. Some of the old things that we need to put in the new version, but some of new ideas or new proposition that came along, the new challenges and the evolution of the ecosystem, because it has really evolved a lot in these 3 last years or 5 last years. So yes, it is a work in progress, even for the to plan or to design our new programs to actually to respond to the new challenges of the ecosystem. A lot of things are changing, so you cannot only adopt or take one of your old programs there in the corner of your drawer and then to put it implemented. Actually, you need every time to check if it is still relevant. Is it still something that the startup are needing? It will bring impact to them, etc. So each time we need to check and to validate our assumptions and hypotheses. And our challenges or the key lessons that I would like to share today with my fellow and peers, it's more about the idea of the Startup Act. So it will not maybe be perfect at the first, but you need to push it and to go with it forward with the whole shareholders from the public and private and startups. Some startups will not be happy with it. Some other would be happy, also from the other stakeholders, investors, etc. But at least you have 1 mile forward, and it's better than nothing, but you need to work on the next steps. And also the thing that we faced in Tunisia is that we launched an initiative with 3 legs, but then the 3 legs are not going on the same rhyme, on the same tempo. So what we have is we have a law that is implemented, that is going really smoothly, and everything is fine. Now because it's 3 years, so it's 36 session of labeling of startups. 646 startups are labeled. So it's been a chunk of things have been done with the Startup Act, but the other pillars are not maybe evolving in the same like
pace.
Rhythm, yes, and yes. So what we have now is we have the ecosystem programs that are working. We have already around 50 startups that are getting the funds and the grants and are working well. We are supporting also the startup support organizations, incubators, accelerators to launch new programs and to fill the gaps in the ecosystem, so we can work on the puzzle altogether, on the mosaic altogether. But from the investment side, it's taking much more time and investment and energy, because it's not that easy. And on terms of regulatory, on terms of also we have to take everything in consideration. We're going through yes, a great time for Africa, but also on terms of the worldwide, we've been through a crisis with the COVID, so investors are not that prepared to go to invest maybe in some emerging markets like Tunisia. So this is what happened. So what we have now as an outcome, we have an initiative, but the three legs are not going on the same tempo. And so the impact cannot be really measured right now. We need to wait till all the things are implemented and operating like normally, to then say, okay, what's happening with the initiative, so we can maybe change some things, we can make it evolving, update new things. Now we're just seeing the impact of the Startup Act, so the legal, and it is bringing a lot of impact actually, even on the mindset of the startupper and the young people here in Tunisia. They are considering startups since school. So it is really amazing as a shift from an average Tunisian young boy like 5 years ago. It was not the question of would you like to start up your career, your startup after school would not be on the three first options. So so this is a great shift, but then we need to wait for more time to measure and assess actually the impact of the investment strategy.
Great, thank you, Salma, for sharing. Earlier, we have talked about the importance of the collaboration. So I would like to know how in Senegal, Karine, and in Uganda, Joël, and maybe you also, Caitlin, in South Africa, how do you bring people together, the key players of your startup ecosystem? Do you create spaces for them in order to exchange? How do you collect feedbacks from the entrepreneurs, maybe? So do you have any approaches in order to encourage and to foster this collaborative approach? Joël, maybe we start with you and then we go Karine and then Caitlin.
Thank you, Aziza. Wonderful question. I wonder whether the minutes planned for this will be enough, because there's so much wisdom to be shared. However, to speak to the point of collaboration, we have learned a lot because we have tried out a number of things in Uganda. First, knowing that we were all building in silos, which is something that we have done a lot here in, let's say, generally in Africa. And then people end up competing and offering, and it's not even active competition, probably offering the same aspects, but not in an efficient way, especially for a young ecosystem. So what we did is to identify the key aspects that support in ecosystem building. And one of the lessons actually that we learned from it is that beyond the tangible outcomes that everyone might be looking at, relationships and ecosystem building must be built on trust between the people that are working. I'll use a very vivid case in point that Aziza, we just met a couple of months ago, and now we are discussing, we built a level of trust beyond just sometimes it is not directly the tangible financial outcome that must be there, but that we work together in recommending and understanding what is the other's value proposition that they stand out with, and how can I focus on what I do best to allow another ecosystem player also focus on what they do best, so that we each support each other or benefit each other versus competing against the other. So one of the things we did was to work on a common goal of mentorship standards. So we decided to choose a very basic topic. Amongst all the challenges that entrepreneurs had, we realized that one of the complaints that we were all in a way losing clients because entrepreneurs would receive haphazard work because there were no known standards anywhere of who is a mentor. Everyone wants to pose as a mentor. All of you maybe know that there is always this conundrum that Uganda is one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world, but this just means that a lot of hustlers are here, let me put it that way, in that also the business of business development has become a proper business. And all you do is you tell some entrepreneurs that I am a mentor, and then you want to charge them money. And we realize that we need to at least stop that, because you recruit a startup into a proper incubation program, and once you ask them, have you attended any other trainings? They have attended multiple, but they are nowhere in the development of the startup. And you wonder what have they been receiving from all the time they have invested in some of these. So we sat together as ecosystem players and came up with standards. Now, the standards, just like the Startup Act, are not very easy to implement across the board. But the most important aspect there was that we build the ecosystem relationships together. We worked together on a project. Indeed, it came out and we produced the draft standards. Adaptation is still work in progress, but that was the first main initiative that happened where we collaborated together. Then secondly is the aspects where we said, can we share each other's strength? So we created something called Give a Day with a colleague. I don't know if she's on the call, but Kevin Grace led this initiative of Marine Finance to say, can we share learning? So each ecosystem player would invite another or others to come together and just have a breakfast together with these physical meetings and just share something that they feel the other partner could learn as we develop together the ecosystem. Of course, many of these initiatives have also been supported by some players like Agidias, again, UNCDF, and ultimately we came up with the Startup Uganda, which is a collective organization bringing together various ecosystem players to push both the Startup Act, but also to run what we call the Kampala Innovation Week, or now the Uganda Innovation Week, where all the ecosystem players encourage their startups to bring their products, meet investors, network in one common area in Kampala. So those are some of the things that we have been doing in the past.
Great, thank you so much, Joel. Karine, in Senegal, what about Senegal? What are the initiatives you are guys doing in order to foster this exchange and the collaboration mindset?
Indeed, as a government, the approach we took was first to really understand the ecosystem and how it has evolved. And then based on that, to be able to set up a strong vision for our country and know where we want to go in 5 years with this ecosystem. Now, once that is done, the very next step is to be able also to map properly this ecosystem and make sure that this mapping is dynamic enough so that we can keep on tracking the evolution and who is doing what in the ecosystem. Because as Joel mentioned, indeed, we have all, I think, one common pain point. It's that we have a lot of actors in the ecosystem, sometimes doing the same thing. Some of them also have been doing the same thing for years, and they have not rethought their own programs or product services to the entrepreneurs. So at some point, you need to make sure that everybody is able to map itself on a common mapping and be able to review its own positioning in this mapping and if it needs to review the programs, if it needs to. So all of that, it's not something that usually one private could be doing. It's really the government that has to be there to be able to put up the right framework and the tools for those players to come together and to have this level of visibility. So this is one of the things we are really working on at the moment. Indeed, we have started a journey of structuring the value chain of support to entrepreneurs. And this is something we do with all of those who do support to entrepreneurs. Can be financial, technical, so it can be private or public sector. We find them also. We find there also the ESOs who are part of the process. So the idea for us is to be able to have one common referential regarding how to support startups, and also to provide a guide that will be updated for startups and entrepreneurs in general, not just startups, to be able to understand what's the process, who you should see at which moment of the process. So we are really working on that, and then you need to be able to do that, and also to just make sure that the strategy is going to be implemented properly. You need to make sure that you have all the stakeholders around the table, and for that you need to get the trust from these people. And this is also what Joel mentioned. It's really important to build the trust. What I've seen in Senegal is that it's first the private sector that has been really involved in startups, and now the government has come and supports now the startups. So there is a trust also that the private sector was able to set up, so that this specific segment can be better addressed by the government itself. Now it's also our role to work on how we can build more trust for other partners to come on board. So it can be the donors, the international VCs, the investors. It can be also some other startups from other ecosystems. So we should first work on building a strong ecosystem, and this is what now we are having at the moment, but we need to keep on strengthening that, and also to work on international partners, so that we can make sure that this ecosystem can also benefit from all these opportunities at a more international level. So this is really what we learn, and that it's not something we can do all by ourselves without having the trust from the ecosystem itself. So we have been also during the last years working a lot on how do you make sure that each ecosystem player can understand what we do, why we do it, how we're going to do it with them, what they can bring on the table, what is the value we can also bring to them. And this is a work also in progress, because at the end of the day, if you take, for example, the ESOs, most of the ESOs now understand how we work, and we work together. But some of them also still have some like suspicions about it is still the government, it's really big. Maybe they will be coming at some point and doing what we do, and we don't have the same financials so that we can really compete. So we need to make sure that they can understand it is not a competition. We are all together, it's a one boat, and we need to make sure that this boat is going to arrive to the port. So, and this is really what we are building at the moment with our ecosystem, building trust. I think we have now the trust of most of the ecosystem players, but this is still something we have to reinforce. We have also the donors, the international players like the Bank of African, the African Bank of Development, the French Agency of Development, and all those stakeholders that trust us, that give us some resources so that we can bring support to the entrepreneurs. And we monitor the whole process, because at the end of the day, you have also to give your metrics and KPIs. And so we also work a bit like a startup sometimes on how we implement our programs. And we have our own programs that we have developed, but we develop them by co-creating the program with the ecosystem. It's really important for us. So our incubation, acceleration programs, they are all co-created with the ecosystem. And then when we need to implement, it's the ecosystem players who implement the program with us. So the ESOs would be the one hosting the startups, so that the startups can get the proper support. But also we need to upskill sometimes ESO staff so that they can also be on top of the nutshell to be able to maybe, for example, host startups that will be doing going through the acceleration phase, which needs more support, more specific expertise, etc. So we work also on reinforces the ESOs themselves. So we should not just focus on entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs are part of the whole ecosystem. We should all focus on who are the partners we want to get involved. How do we get them involved? Do we need to reinforce some of these partners? If so, how can we do it? Who are the ESOs we need to engage? How can we leverage on these ESOs, but also reinforce them, give them resources? At the moment, for example, we subsidize all the technical assistance to startups. So we pay the startups, who pay the ESOs to get access to the technical support, even though the curriculum and the program has been co-designed. So this is some of the ways we collaborate with our ecosystems.
Great, very insightful, I think. So maybe to wrap up, you and Joelle, you have mentioned the importance of maybe having a clear common vision on a national level, and also about the importance of building trust within all the key players of the ecosystem, and also to have a mapping of the ecosystem. I think this is very important in order also to avoid the replication of initiatives and doing the same thing and go more into a co-creation approach. Thank you so much for sharing. Caitlin, would you like to add something else?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to. Oh, sorry, Caitlin. I just wanted to add also something quickly. It's about also opening the ecosystem to some others' ecosystem. It's really important. I think we will go back to this afterwards.
Yes,
but this is something we work. Yeah, we work a lot on that because it's important for the players to be exposed to some other players from like key ecosystem and be able to build the bridges and also to grow themselves.
Yes, exactly. We will talk about it more in depth maybe later. Yes. Caitlin?
Yeah, I think the peers on the call are very accurate in terms of what they're saying. I think some of the lessons we've learned along the way is, whilst this is informally dubbed a Startup Act, you will typically find once the legislation is passed, it's not termed a Startup Act. It may fall into your Small Business Act or whatever your legislation is specifically within your country. What we have found particularly useful when being in our lobbying process is ensuring that those that are outside of the ecosystem, so, you know, we don't need to preach to those in the ecosystem. They know why we need it. They know why we want it. But when we're having to canvass the will, the political and leadership will of those who are not familiar with the ecosystem or the opportunity, it's tremendously useful to connect it to a national or global mandate that everyone is compelled to fulfill. And what we've really positioned to our politicians and our leaders, and this includes private sector leaders, is to say that at the end of this day, this speaks to employment and income and job creation opportunities for the youth. So as we know, based on the forecasted statistics, the global workforce will come from Africa in the future. We will have the world's biggest youth population. And with declining population age statistics in other countries, they will rely on Africa to service the world. With that being in mind, looking at the rate of unemployment amongst our young people, this is a youth issue. The Startup Act is a youth issue. This is what is going to create the job opportunities for the young people on our continent. And I think when we started engaging our politicians on that note, it really hit a chord, and it was much easier for them to really commit themselves when they saw how it was feeding into a much bigger mandate and problem that we've been trying to solve. So that's been phenomenal. The second thing we have also done is really make sure that those who are contributing and sharing it are credible players in the ecosystem. So it's important to have trust. It's important to have passion. We must have those two, because that's what changes the world. But at the same time, we've been sure to actually work with our leading venture capital associations and venture capitalists to show the data of what we could be generating and almost of the lost opportunity. And numbers speak volumes. So we've been working with SAFCA. We've also been working with partners that perhaps have multiple African footprints. And we find this useful because then there's comparative data. So looking at Endeavour, who is been operating across the world in the startup space, but also a very strong influential player within our ecosystem and has financially backed many of our successful startups. So having their voices around the table makes a tremendous difference. I think also getting our successful founders as spokespeople has been useful. So we're looking at Go One, which is a big story for South Africa, Yoko, Sweep South, people who are really on the cold face of scaling startups, speaking out about this. So we've had sessions where we've briefed them, shared with them, gotten them on board and asked them to speak out as lobbyists. I think what has also been useful is in this process, and I think we don't even have an answer yet, is we're obviously wanting to accelerate the adoption of our act, but we're also conscious not to slide it into an existing act where it may not get the front and center attention that we want it to get. So legislation is one thing. The next question is which government department is going to take responsibility for this and drive it forward? And we've been quite clear that we'd like this to sit in the president's office, which is bold, but you know we're innovators. We can only work with audacious goals. I think perhaps my last point is, and that's what's so critical about what is happening here on this call, is it's critical that each of us make the progress that we do within our countries so that we can showcase the case studies of success to our own countries. So while we might be succeeding and failing in different avenues of getting our legislation evolved or accepted, everybody's win is the next country's win. And I think that's something that's critical.
Great. Thank you so much. A lot of work is being done, and we are being kind of a lot positive about what is happening in the forest startup ecosystem, and which is normal because a lot of work is being done so far. But maybe my question now is maybe to talk more about the challenges. If I ask you what would be the 2 key challenges in your respective startup ecosystem, maybe Karine in Senegal, what are the key challenges, like the top 2 challenges maybe you have in Senegal today in order to drive and to continue the growth of the startup ecosystem?
So I'm thinking of first one, digital literacy. How do you make sure that the population is aware and at ease enough with digital to be able to use it properly for its business, for in its lifestyle. So this is one challenge because for startups that are in the creation phase, when they need to test the market, etc., maybe they would go and test it with one small like range of people, and that would be working. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you have a market. So how do you make sure that you have enough people to buy your product on the first market that you're targeting, and that from there you can grow into new markets? So this is really a challenge. And I see that, for example, most of the SMEs we have, because we have, and this is also one challenge, we have an economy that is mainly informal. So you have like 97% of our economy that is informal. It's a lot. So how do you make sure that this informal economy can become more formal, but also can use the digital, and that digitization can be done within those SMEs and the really small companies, so that it becomes a business for those who provide the solutions, but also it becomes an opportunity for our economy to be more to be more structured and more mature, you know. So this one is really a big challenge, I would say. Okay. And maybe the other ones is about the type of financial products that we can provide to the entrepreneurs when they are in early phase. At the moment, we provide honorary loans. We know that ideally it should be subventions, because they still are in this process where maybe 90–80% of them won't make it. So it's their right to test, learn, and maybe also fail, you know. Still, we cannot do subvention in terms of financing. We can only do it with the financial assistance. And you don't see much of this kind of funding, like subvention for these early stage companies to test, learn, and maybe fail. So this is what we will see probably in some competitions. And this is why you see a lot of startups doing all the competitions, all the contests, because they are trying to get this type of money. So this is and the last challenge I want to share is about scale up. is about those startups who have been on the market for a long time, who have been going through incubation maybe 2, 3, 4 times, because at the end of the day, they cannot find the proper assistance they need at this phase where they need to scale their product and sometimes services. So how do we make sure that we can also help them being more credible for the VCs and prepared to open also their capital? And how do we build the trust with the VCs to make sure that they are at ease with financing these startups, and specifically because we are in a francophone zone. So this one also is a challenge, to be honest.
Yes. Exactly.
When most of the investors are Anglophone, so you need also to be there to help them understanding how it works. Maybe there's some harmonization to doing due diligence processes and tools so that they can be more at ease when coming into this market. Better understanding of the legal framework here. All of that are the challenges we want to address now, and we are in this phase indeed.
Great, thank you, Karin. Caitlin, earlier you have talked about the exchange control and access to early stage investment. Do you see any other maybe bottlenecks or challenges on the South African startup ecosystem today in order to continue the rising and the growth of the startup ecosystem? Anything to add?
I think what's interesting is what Karina said, because South African entrepreneurs have the same challenges. You know, at the end of the day, the market within South Africa is relatively small. Today, I was fortunate enough to have a session with the High Commissioner from Singapore, and he was talking about how Singapore has to trade with the rest of the world because their population is so small. And if you look at our countries alone, the growth of a startup is limited unless they can have the market access to other countries. But within our countries, even where there are sizable populations, it's the fact that the populations and the trade is informal. So it's about being able to trade with informal markets, which is really where that bigger opportunity lies. So I think almost accessing informal new markets within your own country remains a challenge. Secondly, exactly the same as what Karine said, it's funding at certain stages. And I think particularly at the early stage, there's underdeveloped funding mechanisms for those startups looking to grow. Perhaps one very obvious factor that we're facing is we need stable electricity in South Africa. It's not a very popular conversation. And yes, our innovators are very innovative, but our energy regulator needs to stabilize the electricity supply for us to really flourish.
Yes, exactly. Joël, Salma, would you like to add maybe something before we move to the last part of the panel?
Yes, actually, I think all here we are going through the same challenges. It is like cheerful to be with you guys today to see that we are having same problems. So this reminds me of the frontier ecosystem and frontier innovation. So we're all at relative like early stage ecosystem that we are trying to build through legal frameworks, through investment, through initiatives, fostering and empowerment initiatives. And we all have this actually target or objective is to achieve, like to have 1 or 2 or 3 very like success stories with unicorns and with great exits, with great fundraising. I know that in South Africa, there are a lot of great fundraising that happened like for the last 2 years. For Senegal, I was very happy to see that fundraising for WAVE, which is amazing for the Western Africa, from the more French-speaking Africa, and now we're happy also Tunisia to enter in the pool with InstaDeep fundraising and with the $100 million. So a lot of things are happening. We have to keep pushing. Actually, as you said, Caitlin, I see myself in that. It's you need to build trust every day, but you need to keep that passion every day to achieve the objective. So I cannot add anything like very relevant or different from what you've said, because I find myself in each challenge that you brought up today in the discussion.
Yeah, and exactly, this is one of the goals maybe of this webinar today, is to be aware and to see that by the end of the day we are facing the same challenges, we are going through the same thing. So which leads me maybe to the last point of this webinar, where I would like to maybe get your point of view about the importance of building bridges between the different African startup ecosystems. We talk a lot about the importance of building those bridges, but I would like today to know how are you maybe in your startup ecosystem, what are the initiatives done or being done so far in order to foster and to build those bridges maybe with other startup ecosystems in the continent or maybe also outside of the continent, to be open to other regions. Joël, maybe importance of building bridges in Africa?
Thank you. I will steal one more second backward and add a small challenge and say, which will lead into this, that yes. One of the things in the ecosystem, I'm not sure if, well, by now I would be sure some of you have already faced it, is the readiness for the finance of the entrepreneurs. I'm not the believer that there is no money. The money is there, but are the takers ready to take it? So for us, it is very heavy in Uganda that very many innovative entrepreneurs, there is always this debate in Africa, which is overlooked, of between survival versus the finance that someone needs. So some people are at the very start just ensuring that they are getting by day by day. And are they ready for the bigger finance? Are they invested in operations of and the strategic framework of their businesses? So as I'd be interested, for example, to have a further conversation, let's say with you, Kathleen, on the investment readiness and in terms of, if, for example, if I presented to you the startups of Uganda, would you be willing to invest in them? Because the money is out there, and as we prepare ourselves to be the frontier in the next couple of years, that Africa will have definitely the biggest population and the like, are we preparing the population to actually partake of this money in a trusted way that they can do it? And then also, of course, I'm glad about the enabling environment that we are trying to create to enable the entrepreneurs to actually thrive within the ecosystem. But leading to to building bridges, again, as I said, Aziza, I commend you for this that we have started here today. We always, I would like to use the word that we put our heads in the sand and claim that we are so different. Africa, we have very similar challenges, as we have seen here from the south to the north, similar challenges. So we need to work together and learn from each other on how to do this. Now, for example, that's why when we're making this proposal, there is, for example, the network that we have, that is the Commonwealth Alliance for African Young Entrepreneurs. And the aim of that initiative has been and is continuing to be, in fact, I'm glad there are a couple of members there, even from Zambia and other countries, to say, can we work together with various entrepreneurs and connect them? Already in the chat, I see someone who is interested in opening up a business in Uganda and in Senegal. This is the power of building the bridges, that now they have a chance to connect with someone. I think there is another from Enable, someone who wants to also maybe finance a certain other organization. With this connection and communication, we have a chance of building faster, and also picking on to what Kathleen said earlier, entering the markets. Last time I visited South Africa, I met one of the colleagues who is interested in selling products in Uganda, and I have worked out to see, can I support them in making that connection? So all these are supposed to be an openness to continuing having these initiatives, these conversations, and then we will be a smaller continent than we are because we'll be working together for a common goal and a common belief. Thank you.
Awesome, great message. Thank you, Joël. Caitlin, maybe? Because South Africa is bringing people together. I mean, I was part of Africa Arena in South Africa in November, and I've seen that people from all over Africa, I think, were there. And I think it's very important also to create those spaces through international conferences to bring investors and also innovation hubs from the different startup ecosystem in Africa. So what do you think about the importance of building those bridges, and what are the initiatives that you are maybe part of in order to foster this bridges building?
Yeah. So I think you're 100% right. We know that. I don't think Africa can showcase Africa enough. And I think if we look at African innovation centers and hubs around the world, we have a lot of brand building to do to elevate African innovation. And to elevate African innovation onto the global stage is going to take a collective issue, a collective push. It's not going to be one country that gets it right. So I think the first part to building bridges is we have to do it collectively, but also in our own right. So I think what we do when we try to build global relationships and Pan-African relationships, what is critical to that is to try and capture the value of that relationship. It can be very easy to get to know a lot of people and have very large networks. But if you're not able to quantify or capture the value between the exchange of those two organizations, I think you can end up not being as productive as you possibly could be. We always think in twofold. So where we are in Cape Town, South Africa, is we have a number of global events that are hosted here. You referred to Africa Arena. We have a number of showcase events that happen down here that attract international investors, that showcase African startup success stories. We have the highest number of accelerators that operate on the continent in South Africa. And those are global accelerators that have come to make their home in South Africa. It's important to welcome these global accelerators that are looking to come and get to know Africa better and to welcome them into your economy. I think also it's important to look beyond building relationships, and that's also to work with your government to build data centers. So the reason I say that is we often talk about the free trade agreement that is coming into effect or slowly operationalizing across Africa and the opportunity it brings for South Africans to trade with Uganda and vice versa. But I think the opportunity is so much bigger. We've been talking about a digital free trade agreement. And what you will see with the smaller high-tech economies is that they are forming collectives where they have these digital trade agreements with each other where they can cross-sell because they adhere to the same financial regulations. And that will potentially be coming down the line. But what we need to see is that the world is not just going to be selling to Africa and Africa to Africans. The whole world is going to globalize into digital free trade over time. And with that, we can have all the best relationships in the world, but we need to work now to start making sure that we have our global partners setting up their data centers in our hubs so that we have the opportunity to form part of those digital free trade agreements. So doing what we do best and future planning.
Perfect. Thank you, Caitlin. Salma, would you like to add something about bridges building?
Yeah, sure. Actually, for me, connection is very important, and I see it at 3 levels. So first of all, it's a local connection, because I guess you as well, maybe you have this same thing, creating the chain value, a value of chain of the whole shareholders in the ecosystem, all the actors between the investors, startup support organization, incubator, accelerator, but all the, and then finally the startups. It's very important to build the bridges between them at first and to create a more comprehensive and inclusive ecosystem. And that's the first level. The second level, I see the opportunity and the need actually for the whole African countries and the African ecosystem to be connected to each other, because Africa can be a very good playground for new innovation and for the new challenges that our markets are going through that cannot be shared in the markets like Silicon Valley or in Seoul or Singapore, etc. They cannot share the same needs or going through the same needs and challenges, so then they cannot actually test and experiment their innovation. And for us, actually, so we need to open up or to educate our startups and entrepreneurs to consider Africa as a first market, not only at a local scale like Tunisia, as we kept saying for the 5 last years. Start off with your country, and then you can expand and go and see other countries. Maybe for some kind of innovation, and where we talk about deep tech, or maybe more challenge tackling, like environmental, energy, this kind of startups, they need actually to comprehend and to access to the whole market. And this is our roles here to build the bridges for them, and to make them to make the circulation of the traffic easier between all the ecosystem and all the markets, to at least to provide the information about what it for a Senegalese startup, what is it needed here in Tunisia to get access to the Tunisian market. And I can say, okay, you can have that, and you can go to this hub, to this innovation hub, or to this startup support organization. It can help you. So this is the kind of relationship that I actually dream of having with you guys here, so we can offer more opportunities to our startups.
Great, thank you, Salma. Karine, anything to add before we wrap up?
Yes, I will start by sharing a bit of what we do so far, and then I will move to what I think we can do all together indeed, because we are all concerned. So for what we do at the moment to build those bridges, first we have the startups immersions that we do, and the ESOs immersions in some top of the natural ecosystem, so that they can really inspire from that, and that we can keep all together on building our own ecosystem based on the lessons learned also there. The second one, and it's the same as Caitlin has mentioned also, is related to the event. So we make sure also that we can have those startups and ESOs coming to some international level to get international exposure. So we do it, for example, at the Vivatech, at the CES Vigos, and all those, and also Africa Arena. So this big time in the ecosystem. And the other steps we have now really passed is to organize ourselves some of those events. So for the moment, it's more like co-organization, but we plan by the end of the year to also organize one big event at a Pan-African and international level here in Senegal. We will also host the second Senegalese, let's say, Western African edition of Africa Arena, happening by the end of April normally. We will communicate more formally on that. So all of that is really important also to make sure that we can attract the stakeholders from diverse ecosystem and build those bridges. We also do ourselves as their team some learning expedition, so that we keep on having this view upon what we can learn from in this ecosystem, and from that we can build the proper partnerships. So we have like local partnerships, but we also have international partnerships based on what is worthy for our ecosystem. For example, when we wanted to address the vertical of gaming and virtual and augmented reality, we didn't have many players on the ground, so we needed also to collaborate with Unity, which is one of the leaders, together with Ubisoft on this vertical. So this is the type of partnership we want to identify when we do the learning expedition, for example. The other one is being part of Pan-African networks. It's really important for us. So we are part of the AfriLabs network, and also of the Africanov network. And in the next step, I will go back to that. So we've been, for example, bringing startups and ESOs to the AfriLabs annual gathering last year, and that has been a great time for us. So now we are connected with more than 100 hubs throughout Africa via a WhatsApp channel. So really easy, and lots of opportunities there. And also we host Pan-African program here. So for example, we have the Startup Bootcamp program that we are doing now in Senegal for the 2 coming years. The next cohorts will be hosted here. So it's also a way to have those startups coming from all over Africa to Senegal, so that we can connect also the entrepreneurs. What I think we can do all together to really keep on building the bridges is first co-creating some programs. How can we leverage on the existing maybe programs we have and that are maybe in the same framework and see how we can put them together or create together new programs that can bring value on our markets. Also interconnecting our infrastructures. We have some hubs, we have the ESOs with their own platform. How do you connect those together so that maybe one of your hub there in Tunisia can be a partner of our hub in Senegal or a partner of a hub in Uganda to help penetrating these markets for our startups. The other thing, and it's really related indeed, it's soft lending. How can we have better soft lending offers for the startups also in collaboration with the ESOs and all the stakeholders, and make sure that there can be more interaction between the entrepreneurs because they have a lot to learn between each other. Most of the time they tell us peer mentoring is really one of the most appreciated things from the entrepreneurs. The other thing, and I'm almost done, is common advocacy. When we see that there are some issues we have on our markets and these issues, we can maybe put our strengths together to really advocate together on that. I think this is something we should be better in doing. And with the Startup Act, there is this kind of common advocacy that is there, but how can we have more of it? And the last but not least thing I wanted to share was about the cross-border storytelling. I think there is a bit of that also in what Kathleen said at some point. But yes, how can we think about bigger markets and share bigger stories than our national market stories? For example, for us in Senegal, we are part of Western Africa, Francophone Africa. How can we really have like a common storytelling in which we can find all of the stories of all those different countries? But when you put it as a region, then it becomes more interesting for an investor, for a donor, for an entrepreneur, because you see a market. Suddenly it's not just one small place, but it becomes a real market that you can address. So we need to be better at really connecting on our storytelling also.
Great. Thank you so much, Karine, Joël, Salma, and Caitlin for this insightful webinar. Personally, I have learned a lot. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think this is like, maybe we will do a series of those one in order to stimulate and to foster those connections. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me for this webinar, and also for those who are here with us as participants. Thank you for all of the comments on Facebook Live and also on Zoom. We will be sharing with you the replay of this webinar. Thank you again, and we hope to see you soon. Maybe here in Tunisia or Senegal, Uganda, maybe on South Africa. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks
a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Go well.
Ciao.